managing and protecting the world's grueling number of endpoints, enabling Tanium's customers to see, control, and protect every endpoint everywhere. Tanium's mission is to provide certainty in uncertain times with the industry's only converged endpoint management. Trusted by the US military and the majority of the Fortune 100, Tanium helps manage and protect nearly 30 million endpoints. Tanium, the power of certainty. Visit securityweekly.com/Tanium to learn more. Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Join us at an upcoming official cybersecurity summit in a city near you. This series of one-day, invitation-only, executive-level conferences are designed to educate senior cyber professionals on the latest threat landscape. We are pleased to offer our listeners $100 off admission when you use code SECWEEK23 to register. That's SECWEEK23. Visit securityweekly.com/cybersecurity summit to learn more and register today. All right. For our next interview, Ross Haleliuk joins us today to talk about product-led growth, about building cybersecurity products. And depending on how the conversation goes, we could go down all sorts of different paths like angel investing, how to build a successful newsletter, what a cyber collective is. This guy does all kinds of cool stuff. Welcome to the show, Ross.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Yeah, and we're happy to have you here. You definitely popped up a lot, I think, on all of our radars with a lot of the work that you do. I started following your newsletter, seeing some of your posts on LinkedIn. LinkedIn has just become this great place for conversation that I think a lot of the conversations I used to have on Twitter, maybe are on LinkedIn or maybe they're different conversations. But yeah, maybe we should start with how you got into security in the first place, because you haven't always been in security, right?
I haven't always been in security. And in fact, I am one of the not too many people who cannot make a statement that I have 20 plus years of experience in the industry. So I have been in product management for quite a long time, probably about 10 plus years. And I have had the chance to work across a number of different industries. So I was in fintech, in e-commerce, retail, wholesale. And then a couple of years ago, a co-founder of Lima Charlie has reached out and was like, hey, this is what we are building, and we would like to have you join us as head of product. And so at the time, my exposure to security has been fairly limited. And what I ended up doing, I had a fantastic conversation with the founder, and then I went home and I started looking into the industry, trying to understand how it functions, what are the different players. And ultimately, after a couple of hours of research, I went back to him and said, you know what, I'm not doing this. This is insane. And so the reason that happened was because, for somebody coming from the outside of the industry, just looking at the space and trying to make sense of all the acronyms, all the abbreviations, all the MDRs, NDRs, XDRs, SIM, source, and on and on and on, was just way too overwhelming. But as you can see, I ended up going back on my decision, and here I am today after a couple of years in the industry. I love the space, and I really, really enjoy being here.
So how, what was it? Okay, how much money do you need? Like, how did he talk you into it after you were like, heck no?
No, so you see, it wasn't really about money. It was more so that I started looking a bit more into the space. And what I came to realize is that, one, the industry is growing rapidly. And two, as much as I have always seen my background that is, not like, as much as I have seen, the absence of the strong security background a weakness at the time, and there are still cases when, my ability to comprehend a certain technical topic is limited. But I did also see the strength and the advantage of coming from a different space and having a different lenses on product in particular. So it was a bit of a process of me convincing myself that, yes, I can do it, and this is interesting. And honestly, I think it has been the best, one of the best decisions in my career.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, the chaos is one of the things that I can't speak for Katie or Tyler, but that draws me to it. I was diagnosed with ADHD later in life, in my late 30s. But when I was diagnosed, it made a lot of things clear to me. And yeah, on the market side, things are happening all the time. On the threat side, defense, offense, everything. It's just a never-ending flow of stuff to learn and understand, which is what drew me towards it.
Yeah, there is that, but frankly, I think the other thing that really became apparent to me after some time in the industry is just that the number of people who come into this space for motives other than money is actually much higher than in many other industries. For example, when you work in fintech, like you're primarily running into people who came into fintech because the pay is good and there is a certain size of the market opportunity. But when you work in cybersecurity, you meet people day after day who ended up in security because that's the passion of theirs. That's something like they have that sense of mission, sense of community, sense of purpose, and sense of service that you don't see in many other spaces.
Yeah,
So you
mission
mentioned,
oriented.
obviously, you came in from the outside to a degree, and you just talked about people coming into the industry because they're mission driven, they're purpose driven. What would you say for you when you were, quote, convincing yourself that this was a good role? What were some of the qualities that think served you well to come back here? And what do you think are some of the qualities as companies are looking for more diversity and inclusion that they should be looking for? Because I think you make a really great point about sometimes it's actually better to come with an outside perspective because you see something with fresh eyes. You don't know the limitations, you don't know the guardrails, you don't know necessarily, you don't have those those tints on your glasses that would make you say, we shouldn't do this. So what are some of those qualities that helped you succeed and that you see in others that you say, hey, bring those to the industry?
That is a fantastic question, and I think the number one would probably be just having the natural curiosity and the ability to ask questions, and then having the humbleness to admit that one, you don't know everything, but two, the boundaries of your knowledge are actually much more narrow than they are for many other people coming with the domain expertise. So to me, the number one thing that has allowed me to learn and grow a lot over the past couple of years was really just the ability to ask questions and say, hey, you know what, tell me more. And I know, like some people at Lima Charlie make fun of me because that's really the quote that's the phrase I end up saying way too often. Tell me more. Like, hey, I like this part of the product experience is painful. Tell me more. Like, why is it painful? Like, what problem are you trying to solve here? So to me, it's this frankly just the ability to ask questions, be transparent about what you know, be transparent about what you don't know, and that really wins people's trust. Like when when people don't try to pretend that they are any deeper into a certain domain area than they actually are.
That's great. I do want to rephrase what you said, and I know it's what you said and it's your thought, but I want to pose it a different way and see if maybe this is true. Because you said you have to admit when you have a narrow set of knowledge. But I think what you meant is that you have a narrow set of knowledge in one area.
Yes, in that specific area. Yeah, right. But it's broad across number of different areas and domains. But it's really this beginner's mindset in this specific field. In which case, for me, it was cybersecurity.
Yeah, and I think that's important to call out. And the reason I did is because you bring things that somebody who's worked in security their whole life may not. And that could be true for a lot of other people. And since we're such a growing industry and we have so many seats to fill, transferring your knowledge from another industry, from another role within a company could be extremely valuable if you, like you say, are humble enough and inquisitive enough to apply your skills to a different area and accept that you're not going to be the smartest person in the room.
And exactly, and that's okay. And I guess the other thing that I would probably highlight is, what was I about to say? Oh yeah, it's well, so not being the smartest person in the room, but also Yeah, you know what? It just left. One of those things.
It'll come to you at 4 a.m. It's okay.
Yeah. So yeah, just another comment on what you guys are talking about. When I became an industry analyst and started to talk to 7, 8 vendors a week, and take all these briefings, one of the things I noticed is that they would get kind of trapped in this bubble of their own language, their own messaging, to where, and it's one of the things that I think took you aback when you first looked at the industry. It sounds like, Ross, is communication is so hard here. And I just had to get used to asking all kinds of questions. Like I still remember when I started on to do marketing, and this is years and years ago. My first marketing stint for a startup, and they were talking about POVs, and I'd never heard the proof of value acronym. Like we had always said proof of concept, so it was POCs. And first time I heard that, for the first couple of days, after 2 days, I was like, what are you guys talking about? Because to me, it's point of view. Like every time I hear a POV, I'm translating it in my head as point of view. So I had to learn very quickly, like not to be shy about asking questions. And I found out crazy stuff like, terms that you thought were simple, that had simple definitions, like east-west and north-south in terms of networking inside a network architecture or an organization. There are like 5, 6 different definitions for north, south, and east, west, depending on who you're talking to. So you have to clarify what you mean when you start using a lot of these terms.
Yeah, and the other thing that I would probably highlight is whoever comes in, like whether they come in from a different industry or even within the same industry, but just move into the different market segment, like they have to have the willingness to put in the work. And like that, nobody can really replace that need, because at the end of the day, like you have to understand what the customer's problems are. You have to understand what like how they're doing their work. You have to understand the dynamics in the industry at the level at which it is necessary for you to do your job. Like if you do product, it's very different than if you're a sales engineer or than if you are a marketer. But in any case, you have to do it. And for me, one of the things, and probably one of the reasons why initially I said no to joining Lima Charlie, was because I don't like doing things halfway. Like in my previous life, when I was in fintech, for example, like 3 months after joining the fintech company that built products for mortgage brokers, I became a licensed mortgage broker. So for me, there was this innate understanding that I want to understand the industry, not just I guess not just horizontally and like what are the different players and how it works, but also vertically. Like how does it look like to underwrite a mortgage from the moment when somebody comes into the doors of the mortgage broker to the moment when somebody walks in with their mortgage approved and their money in the bank account. So and in the same way, like when I started at Lima Charlie, like I bought like somewhere between like 40 and 60 books, just reading about the space, reading about the industry, like looking at like super technical and less technical areas. Like I did this Security Plus certification, which again, for a cybersecurity professional, it's the level of basics that nobody would even mention. But for me, coming out of the industry, like it was actually quite useful. So there is a lot of that where like you have to put in the work, you have to talk to people, you have to ask questions, and you can't necessarily do it within your like a traditional work week. Like if you're new to the industry, you have to do much more for you to get up to speed quickly.
And you really do sound like you know your stuff. Like I was shocked to find out that you've only been in this industry for a couple of years. And there's a couple of folks I've run into like that just pick it up so quick. They I can't tell them from somebody who's been in the industry for 20 years.
Hey, can I ask a question, Ross? I got a chance to meet you a while back when you interviewed me for a piece on investing in cyber. And your piece was absolutely fantastic. Deep, strong journalistic research. I want to ask, like, you seem to have a very innate ability to get up to speed on a topic very quickly and understand it thoroughly, not just at a surface level, exactly like you described. Is there a certain amount of the way that writing may help you solidify that in your brain? Is that something you think that helps you, kind of that the writing and the creation of content helps you get up to speed on areas faster?
It does. It does. And honestly, I think writing has helped me tremendously well. I am, this might sound super buzzwordy, but I am a big I'm a big believer in what Jeff Bezos, I think he described it as, nobody can write a 6 or 7 pager about the business problem and not know what they're talking about. That's why, I personally, I do not like slides. I do not like slides, like slide decks. They mean nothing to me. It's just a bunch of numbers and nice pictures. For me, writing is first and foremost the ability to kind of crystallize my own thinking, refine my own thinking, and build that mental model of whatever problem I'm looking at. And it's only secondary that I end up publishing some of the stuff that I actually work on. And really for me, writing didn't start as the desire to just have a blog about cybersecurity. That hasn't been the case. For me, writing is just a byproduct of me being saying, hey, there are some parts of the industry that I don't necessarily get exposure to as a part of Lima Charlie, or as a part of me being at the head of product. But I'm still interested in those areas of the industry. For example, with you, Tyler, we talked about the industry analyst space, which to me, I know a couple of industry analysts, but I don't have, I've never been one, so I don't have that deep understanding of the dynamics and how it functions. What are the different incentive systems? What are the different players in this space? And so a lot of that research I end up just doing on my own, but quite a bit of it comes from conversations with people and asking questions, saying, hey, I don't know how this works, but I want to build that. I want to build that mental model. So writing, 100%. It's a super powerful tool.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. It's one of the reasons I write the Cyber Why, and I'm sure that's why you write Venture and Security. And I would recommend that everybody, all the listeners, please go subscribe to Venture and Security. You're going to get the pieces that come out are deep tech pieces, better than you find at many analyst firms. They're very, very strong pieces. And I felt like a big portion of how you learn, and I can almost see that in the way you work. Follow-on question to that, I do want to dig in for a second on kind of the other projects, right? Because you're here representing Lima Charlie, but you also have the Venture and Security Substack, and you're doing other things as well. Can you tell us a little bit about what your favorite project is, your passion project, maybe?
I feel like they all are at different, in different ways. So I started the blog about a year, I think, just a bit over a year ago, and it ended up growing. It ended up starting as something that I just did, to share some of my research and some of my thinking, and it grew into something that I did not quite anticipate at the beginning. And so after having a couple of thousand people read and seeing the numbers keep growing by a few hundred people almost every week, what I came to understand is I simply cannot stop. So I'm continuing on and on, trying to publish one piece a week, which is my weekend project. And then I have an early morning project too, where I'm a bit crazy that way. I wake up at 6, and then from 7 to 9, it's the time when I do something else. And that something else at this point is an angel syndicate. So I just announced an angel syndicate for cybersecurity practitioners, where the intent is to bring together people working in the industry, primarily as practitioners, and essentially help shape the future of the industry by making bets on the companies, on the early stage cybersecurity startups that are more practitioner focused. And we can talk about the practitioner focused part a bit later, because that will tie into this conversation about PLG. But yeah, I think so. At this point, I'm doing a couple of things. So the Angel Syndicate, really starting to, there is a lot of paperwork and a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of prep work that needs to happen, but anticipating that sometime probably closer to the end of April, the beginning of May, we'll be able to start looking at some early stage companies. At this point, just talking to a bunch of security practitioners. Some of them are from my network, and others who have reached out and say, hey, I want to be a part of it. And then Blog is just it's a weekly ongoing thing. Lima Charlie is the main area of focus, and I am a big a big champion and a big believer into the approach we are taking and what we are trying to do in the industry. And lastly, the other small initiative that I have been trying to get off the ground, and so far like the response has been absolutely tremendous, is what I call a building cyber collective, which is really just it's a place where we try to match not really match, but bring together cybersecurity startups, like early stage cybersecurity startups, and people from the industry who are interested in acting as advisors, and let them connect via the double opt-in system. So just to eliminate the potential sales pitch and spam, it's double opt-in. So a startup, for example, can say, hey, Tyler, I see you're an expert in cybersecurity product marketing, or like I see you've been an analyst, like we really need an advice around this the question X. Would it be okay to share that advice? Then you will get an email saying, hey Tyler, this is what they're looking for. Are you interested? If you say yes, a double opt-in email goes out. So it's a very low key, very low tech initiative. Again, not purely a community effort. So no money involved whatsoever. Similar to the blog, and so far, we had about 120, 130 advisors join, and then at this point, just a bit over 60 startups. So no expectation, just trying to add value and connect people who may be helpful to one another.
Man, I wish I had your energy. You're seeing these opportunities, you're going after them, and it's and it's all it seems like it's all kind of connected too. And that's what I've noticed with a lot of the things that I do. I do a lot of stuff as well, though I'm not creating some of the cool stuff that you are. Like this podcast is already going.
You are creating. You are creating quite a bit. Like not only this podcast, but I remember when we met at the conference, like you were talking about some of the research that you were doing into like the other side of the industry. So it's quite interesting. You're being too humble.
So, and maybe one more question on while we're talking about creating and being, I guess you could call us creators. That brings up thoughts of people who stream on Twitch and things like that. But enterprise creators, maybe corporate creators. I don't know the right term there. But do you worry about because I'm sure you write blog posts and things like that for Lima Charlie also. Now that I've started a new role and I'm going to be responsible for creating a lot of content, like how do you worry about that creative well going dry, or have you is there anything that you do to kind of reset your brain, and keep those ideas flowing, or is that just not an issue that you have?
I mean, honestly, what I found is one, I think my biggest challenge has been not so much the creative well. My biggest challenge has been compartmentalizing things. So you see, I lead product at Lima Charlie, and so obviously I would like Lima Charlie to succeed. However, I have to try really hard to make sure that doesn't overflow into my content, because it's entirely separate. It's my weekend project. I don't write about Lima Charlie. I don't inject it whether it's necessary or not, just because I work there. So it's those, frankly, I think that managing, keeping those mental lines around the potential conflict of interest and just advocating for something and being biased, I think that has been much harder than as you've said, the creative part. Regarding creativity, I think a lot of it comes down to the discipline, much more so than just being creative. And I'm curious if Tyler can relate, because his Cyberwire newsletter has been one of the things that I read weekly. And unlike Tyler, I don't actually release venture in security on a certain day. So I sometimes give myself a flexibility of saying, hey, you know what, next week I will do it on Wednesday versus Monday. And so I still have those extra few evenings where I can do some tweaks and stuff. But Tyler is being from what I've observed, is being very precise, and he releases Cyberwire on Friday. And so there is much more discipline that probably goes into his writing.
I wish I could say it was more disciplined. I definitely have once or twice in the last handful of months had it slip to a Sunday or even a Monday. But in general, I try to release every Friday. But for me, it's interesting. One thing that caught my ear, and I know we're kind of on a weird topic for this podcast, but I'm going to keep going. One thing that caught my ear is how you like to compartmentalize. I'm the opposite. I want all of my projects to actually tie together, and in an ideal world, leverage additional value as we go through each thing. So, for example, I have to be careful what I say here from an investment vantage point, but if like I have certain ideas from an investment vantage point, I might research them and write them publicly in my thoughts on Cyber Y as I'm trying to research kind of where I want to put money from an investment vantage point. So there's lots of different ways you can tie it in or not tie it in. For me, I like to keep everything super interconnected.
Interesting. So, see, for me, I think I see where you're coming from, and frankly, I think when I say compartmentalize, I probably use the wrong word. Like it's more so about like managing that potential conflict of interest between different things I'm doing. But yeah, I totally agree. Like for me, it has primarily been around the business side of the industry, the investment side of the industry, the product. And then having this more of a practitioner focus that really tie into what we do at Lima Charlie. It ties into like how we build product at Lima Charlie. It ties into like a lot of the topics that I end up researching and writing about. Because like if you let's just say if you're a VC, you probably know quite a bit about the space of industry analysts. But if you're a security practitioner, you might not even suspect that they exist, or you might have your own assumptions about like to what degree they're objective and so on. So there is that tie-in, there is that commonality and like the common underlying foundation, but there is the complexity around like, hey, this is the blog, like I'm looking at the future of the industry, and even though like for example something we do at Lima Charlie, it might very well tie in, but I'm not just going to like I whenever possible I and whenever it makes sense, I also make a disclaimer saying that hey, like this part might not exactly be objective because like I believe it and I live it at my work. So there is that's more what I meant.
Gotcha. Yeah, so let's move on to product-led growth. It's definitely speaking of writing and content. There's been a lot out there in the last couple of years. Certainly recently. I know on CyberY, I very much enjoyed the. There's I think Tyler, you posted yours first, and then you posted. Somebody wrote a retort to it, or was it the other way around? But
no, I posted mine first, and then Steve LaChance contacted me because he was the one that inspired the original post about how PLG doesn't fit for cyber, and he said, "Hey, I want to clap back on that," and I said, "Sounds awesome. Let's see if we can do a debate piece." And so he actually wrote the second piece.
Nice. Yeah, I would love. No,
yeah,
go ahead.
For listeners, let's just let's define it. Make it sense for folks who aren't familiar with product-led growth, and just start there.
So how about I offer something else? How about we talk about it? Like we talk about like I'm super happy to talk about the way I see it without using the word product-led growth or words PLG or any sort of marketing or product terms whatsoever. And then because you see, like my complexity is that any conversation around PLG can get out of hand super quickly. So if we can have a more of a high level conversation, it might get easier.
Yeah, no, let's do it. Did you want to start off, or you want me to start? Okay,
I'm happy to. Yeah. So when I I guess before talking about the specific go-to-market strategy, let me just state a couple of observations that I have made about the industry, and then we can quickly discuss those and challenge some of them if makes sense, and from there talk about the go-to-market. So I see several things. One, I see that the number of cybersecurity vendors is rapidly growing. I see that CISOs are overwhelmed with the number of vendors, with the number of startups trying to compete for their attention and trying to get them into a demo. I also see that CISOs, and I recognize that CISOs were not hired to shop for tools. Like their job is to build the company's security strategy, work on the stakeholder alignment, like work with boards, with executive teams, like build teams and so on and so forth. I also see that more and more security practitioners are starting to spend time like playing with tools, setting up different security tooling in their home labs, trying what's out there, seeing what's active, like staying active in the community and so on. And I also see that more and more CISOs are, at least in some of the conversations I had, are saying that they tend to take recommendations for new tooling from their teams. So, for example, a security practitioner coming in and saying, "Hey, Adrian, I know we are looking for X to solve a specific problem in our company. So I've been playing with this tool, and it seems to do what we need. How about we take a look?" So that's really like those are some of the observations that I have seen, and I wonder, like, from your perspective, would you say that they're true, or are some of them that raise a red flag, and we want to kind of dig deeper into?
Yeah, so let me talk about it from a buyer's perspective, because I
Sure.
was a buyer for a long time, and just come at it from the total opposite end of it, and what I was seeing. So one of the biggest reasons we were buying stuff, I started my career at a large payment processor, and I was there when PCI came out. So obviously PCI forced us to do a bunch of things that we may not have been doing already. So we needed to buy some tools. We needed to do a lot of work to get into compliance with those. I think it was like 250 requirements then. Now it's more than 300 requirements. And, it would take, I remember shopping for a SIM, and it would take 3 or 4 sales calls before I'd see a demo, before I'd ever even see the product. It would take another 3 or 4 sales calls before we could get a proof of concept of the product. I remember we did a shootout between 4 different SIM products, and they sent sales engineers on site to set up these proof of concepts. We gave each of them 5 days. Only one of them worked at all, like up and operational, and we could actually log into it after those 5 days. And that's the one we ended up buying. We didn't buy it because it was great. We bought it because it was the only one that worked. Their own SEs, their own sales engineers, were not able to get the other 3 products from those other 3 vendors even functional. And this is back 2004, 2005. But I still see that today, where you're just required to do so much work, and too often at the end of all that work to see the product, to test out the product, it's just underwhelming. It's like, why is this hidden, behind so much secrecy? Why is there so much friction, just to figure out if I'm wasting my time, and then on the sales and marketing side, it's just, the SDRs, I don't know if any SDRs enjoy what they do, but, for me, receiving cold calls and emails and LinkedIn stuff, like it's unwanted. It's painful. It seems painful for them as well, because they're hearing no all day long, just trying to get their quota of meetings set up, and sometimes people just give in, just to make people stop calling, to make people stop emailing. They don't even want the product. They're not a qualified lead. They just want the pain to stop. So when I became aware of like the product-led growth, the first big thing I saw with that was Linux, right? Linux was just anybody could go use it. You could figure out what it was good for, what it wasn't good for, and it just made me think, like, why would anybody do it any other way?
Yeah. No, 100%. And frankly, this is precisely the reason why, like, I wanted for us to start the conversation by just looking at the fundamentals, like what we see in the industry. And to me, the reason it is important is because normally when you hear the word PLG, it's technically like it's always somebody who just comes in and says, "Oh my God, there is that new big thing. Like, look, like the Silicon Valley is buzzing around PLG. How about we implement it in our company? And then there goes this entirely unreasonable and frankly quite dumb directive somewhere from the top saying, hey, marketing people, product people, let's make our company PLG. And to me, this is where, and this is, this is where, like, I do agree with Tyler that there are quite a few companies that are not going to be suitable for it. And so for me, the company that wants to, again, let's push, let's once again push PLG aside. So what can a reasonable and a well-run company do in the conditions we've just described, where the market fundamentals are that, for startups, getting CISOs into a call is hard, and frankly, it's not a viable strategy. And if product can appeal to practitioners, there is potentially a way they can sell it, to their management and kick off the more traditional sales process that way. So in my mind, the reasonable company would start by understanding their customers, understanding who are they, what do they care about, where do they hang out, understanding the buying process, how do they buy, who is involved in those decisions, how do different sides contribute to that process, what influence do they have. And if understanding if somebody in that buying process has a strong opinion about technology, is there somebody that has built a habit of potentially evaluating different tools, or maybe somebody who can build that habit if they don't have if they don't yet have it? Like, what are the different incentives that come into play? So for me, all of those questions, they are important because they inform a company, they inform the strategy, and they make it clear what is possible and what's not possible. Like, for example, if a person evaluating the security product is a compliance manager, it's less likely that they will go out and try a new tool because there is less culture of doing so than there is, for example, if you look at the security architect who literally can live in the open source world. Or if a hypothetical buyer is a developer, would they buy a security product? Well, it sounds theoretically possible because they're the ones, or they're looking at different technical solutions. But developers, they don't want to do security; they want to code. So the developer is not going to go out of their way to find a great security product. Sometimes they do, but in most cases they don't. So to me, the fundamental challenge with PLG is somebody comes in and says, okay, you know what, there is this big thing, let's become PLG because we want everybody to sign up, to put in their credit card and start paying. But fundamentally, that's not how security products are purchased today, and that's not how they will be purchased. Nobody is going to take an endpoint solution and deploy it across 100,000 endpoints, because it's not how security products are purchased. There is a high reliance on trust. You have to know what the product does. You have to know how the product is built. You have to know, you have to have a level of certainty that the company is going to be around tomorrow. There's just too many things that come into play. So when I think about PLG in the context of cybersecurity, and now I'm happy to reintroduce that term back, I think about being practitioner focused and looking for ways to make it easier for people to try what you do. However, not everybody can accomplish it, and that's okay. So not everybody should be trying to strive for it. That's some of my thinking, but I have much more on that topic.
Yeah.
So to me, what you're describing is very akin to persona-based marketing, right? So you have to know your customer, you have to know some data around them, not just who they are, but where they are, what their habits are, what the typical type of buyer, what they like, what they don't like. So does that mean with a good product-led growth initiative that you have to almost have different experiences, whether that's a product tour or a demo or whatever the case may be? Does that mean that you have to have multiple ones of those? Because most companies don't have one single persona who's their buyer.
I guess that's one of the ways we can talk about it. And I don't again, I think even without bringing the buzzword, the PLG buzzword into the conversation, in my mind, from my experience, it is reasonable to say that, hey, different types, different people discover our product in different ways. So let's find a way to get in front of them. For some, let's just say, like maybe one of the personas who could potentially benefit from our product is a security engineer, or is somebody who is more likely to try and see what the tool does. Well, then the question becomes, how do we get in front of them? Maybe there's some CTF competitions we can expose our product at, or maybe there are some practitioner focused training events that we can do. So the one thing that is not going to work, and like whether we are talking about cybersecurity or any other industry, is just building a cool product, creating a self sign up flow, and just hoping that somebody will start like flocking into the product and adopting it. To your point, what are the other types of people who could adopt what we do? Like, how can they get exposed to it? How can the leadership get exposed to what we do? There is a different channel, and so I guess the concept of the persona-based marketing does tie into the overall conversation about how do we grow the business. And to me, that's the number one thing that people need to answer. Not how do we become PLG, but what works for our specific industry, what works for our specific market segment, and how do we do more of what works and don't do the stuff that doesn't. It sounds very basic, but so many companies you see, like, read some articles saying PLG is great, and they jump into it. They get like they fire their marketing department, they reshape their sales team, they bring somebody else in, and it's like, why are you doing this? Like, why don't you start by understanding what can work for you?
And I feel like there's another ingredient here that I've seen, at least in examples of people who do PLG well, and it's not PLG specific, but if you're going to go the PLG route, you have to do these things well. Your product, or at least, for it to work well for you, your product has to be easy to implement. It has to be fairly easy to use. It's got to be like, if you think of a consumer product, the amount that people will rip to shreds a $5 app in the App Store versus what people are willing to put up with $1 million appliance or enterprise SaaS service is amazing to me. There's just absolutely no patience for a product that isn't well polished, with consumer facing stuff. The budgets are different. The economics are different. But then you see somebody spend $1 million on something and it doesn't even work, and it's just that's 4 out of 10 things that they buy, it seems.
Yeah, no, I have been looking a lot at the question around product management in general in cybersecurity. Like, even if you don't look at the PLG, like cybersecurity, I'm not going to say that cybersecurity is the only industry that has some unique characteristics, because that is not the case. If you look at biotech, if you look at defense, if you look at automotive, like, every industry functions a bit differently. It has some unique characteristics, but so does cybersecurity. And so in cybersecurity, the different types of customers have entirely different needs. So in some spaces, for example, like in many industries, what defines an enterprise version of the product versus like the SMB versus the product for the personal use is the presence of, access management, SSO for better or for worse, maybe access to the audit logs and like access to the API. In cybersecurity, on the other hand, what a regular person needs versus what the SMB needs versus what an enterprise needs are entirely 3 different things. And so you have those differences. Most of cybersecurity is enterprise sales. Most of the products are inherently hard to evaluate. The degree to which buying a product relies on trust is much higher than it is in many other spaces, because not only it is hard to empirically evaluate what the tool does today, but also you have to take a leap of faith that this tool is going to be there tomorrow against an entirely unknown threat that you cannot even forecast the existence of today. So there are many ways in which cybersecurity is a fairly unique space, and companies trying to define a go-to-market strategy, like they have to account for it. Like, whether they're trying to take a PLG route or not, It's just like the fundamentals of understanding your market and understanding the customer.
Yeah, so, Tyler, I'd love to get your thoughts here, but I feel like a lot of, and you too, Katie, a lot of what we're talking about isn't necessarily specific to product-led growth. Like a lot of the stuff we've talked about, understanding your ICP, the personas, who you're selling to, what they actually need, understanding the customer, like that's just important, period. Whether you want to build a large outbound sales and marketing program or have none of that and do entirely PLG, like I feel like a lot of the qualities we're talking about are just things that you need to do. Like you need to fundamentally build a good product that's easy to use, isn't terribly buggy and is easy for people to get up and working with. And also just understanding what the product is. As an industry analyst, I can't tell you how excited I would get sometimes when I could find a screenshot of the product. Like best day ever. If I can find a screenshot of the product, I can better understand what it does. And for some companies, it's incredibly hard. Like forget a demo, forget freemium or like actually running it in my environment. Just seeing a screenshot of what the UI looks like is a huge challenge for some of these companies for me.
Sorry, I coughed right into that ending. I totally agree with you. I think all in all, if we look at the bulk of the startup, small to mid-sized businesses in cybersecurity, most of them are two people in a garage, right? Two tech people with a great idea, get some seed funding because there's so much money sloshing around. Still, even in the downturn, there's so much money sloshing around cyber that they come up with an idea, they create a little bit of traction and get themselves a bunch of money, and then they say, okay, great, now what's our market? What's our position? What's our message? How do we do the GTM? Vast majority of the younger companies I talk to have no idea how to build a go-to-market. They just don't. It's just not something they've been product people their whole lives. Their previous CISOs now creating a product, and they just don't understand how to build the business. And I think it's a massive gap in our market. And I don't know if that's unique to our market or if that's high tech, high growth in a general sense of the word. But there's definitely a gap for that type of skill set. It's one of the skill sets that my firm tends to bring to the table for those younger companies is that go-to-market experience.
I think you've sort of hit the nail on the head, and I think the misconception of product-led marketing is that, oh, you just let the product speak for itself. That's not what product-led growth is. That's not what it means. You have to have an understanding of your market and how to reach people. But the reality is now versus 10 years or 20 years ago, people are spending months ahead of time doing their own research before they want to talk to a salesperson. I used to be in sales and you could actually call people and you'd get people on the phone. I don't think you can do that anymore. Nobody wants to talk on the phone. Sending emails is not super effective. I know when we get emails within our company for people soliciting us, that sometimes people will post them and make jokes about just how bad they are because it's a spray and pray approach. And if you can't understand marketing, if you can't understand targeting, if you can't understand what your position in the market is and your product differentiation, your product isn't going to speak for itself, and your sales tactics, no matter what they are not going to work. So you have to be smart about marketing, and you can't just say, well, we're going to build it and they will come. This is not Field of Dreams. That's not how it works. You have to be really smart and systematic about how you go through building that product-led growth marketing plan, because it's not just, here, try my product. And I think that's a huge misunderstanding. I can't talk about other industries. I'm sure it's that way too, but a huge misunderstanding, especially in the cybersecurity industry. And Adrian, to something you said, screenshots go a long way. Everybody's so keen on getting these great websites with cool graphics that they forget that when people are doing research, they need to be able to differentiate for themselves. They don't want to have to read through buzzwords. They don't want to have to guesstimate on what you're doing. They want to be able to see it. And you're not giving away your secret sauce if you're more clear. I know there's SEO. I know there's analyst coverage, but you're not giving away your secret sauce, your intellectual property, if you're clear on what your product does without the buzzwords.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. And frankly, like I have, I can talk a lot about this whole concept that I discuss quite often, and I wrote a bunch of blog articles at Venture in Security. It's about the idea of moving from the promise-based into the evidence-based security. Where there was a time when a company would come into the vendor and say, "Hey, vendor, I need something to make me safe." And then the vendor would sell this amazing product where they press the red button, it activates Shield, and now they're good. Now they're safe. Like fast forward into 2023, we know that is not how security works. And having the products, having the components that play well with others, that can be evaluated, can be tested, can be assessed, can function like in the way that's interoperable and can be integrated with other tooling is important. So to me, I like, again, I don't necessarily think, see, I'm not a big, I'm a product guy, and as a very pragmatic person who does a lot of also work with early stage startups. And by the way, I absolutely agree with you, Tyler, around the typical cybersecurity founder persona. But I do see a lot of this too, and the idea that PLG is amazing is very appealing to people who think that, well, we can just keep building and then the customers will just come because we've got the new cool technology. And unfortunately, that is not the case. And companies companies that are looking to succeed, companies that are looking to grow and build a sustainable go-to-market strategy, like have to look at what works, have to try different things and look at what works. Making the product accessible is a great idea. Making the product easy to try is a great idea. But at the end of the day, they're in it to build a company, to build a solution to the problem, and to build a business on top of that solution, so that they can continue solving other problems that are adjacent to what they started with. And unless they build that sustainable go-to-market strategy, whether it's through PLG or whether it's not through PLG, if it is more suitable for their specific market, like they won't be able to sustain themselves.
Yeah,
And I know.
Go ahead, Ross.
Sorry, yeah, I know that initially, like if you look from the outside, like somebody like coming with the head of product title and with the product hat, like you probably naturally and also I do talk a lot about PLG. Like I wrote like 7 or 8 or even more posts about it. Like you probably naturally expect me to be like, hey, you know what? Forget about everything. Here is PLG. But I'm a much more reasonable human than that.
So, in the vein of things that work for everyone, as we wrap up here, Ross, where would you point people to get those fundamentals? I mean, you've already thrown out some great tips, making it easier for people to learn about your product, stuff that seems obvious, but apparently has to be said. But other than your blog is obviously a good source for a lot of this stuff. Or your newsletter, which you can read as a blog. That's the thing I love about newsletters now is it's flexible. But where would you point people to for those fundamentals?
I mean, frankly, I don't think there is there isn't a lot about specifically PLG in cybersecurity. I mean, there is enough, but a lot of it has some agenda behind it, and people trying to either sell a certification or sell a course. I think fundamentally, there's some like basics of product management that are useful. There's some great books. What comes to mind? Oh. I feel like I've been reading just so much that I'm having trouble just shortlisting a certain book. There is a lot. I think there is an institution called like either Product Led Alliance or something similar, like productled.org or productled.com. They have a lot of materials around metrics and around like the approach itself. But fundamentally, like honestly, I think picking up any book about the go-to-market strategy is great. Like I like obviously Awesome. It's a fantastic book about positioning in general. Like incredibly useful. In the context of product, there's so many YouTube videos where there are institutions such as Product School that put in a lot of content, Reforge, which is like a Silicon Valley based, like a boot camp and school run by practitioners. There is a lot, and frankly, I think what's even more useful than reading books is trying and seeing what works, and like being very methodical about it.
Always be A/B testing. Right?
Yeah. It's hard. Like, it's hard to A/B test when you're at an early stage, because frankly, if you have like 100 people visiting your website, like what can you
It's
even
not
test?
enough. Yeah.
But like talking to your peers, seeing what has worked, and talking to people outside of those like shiny great conferences and events where everybody comes in with a great slide deck and says how awesome everything is and how we've implemented this fantastic framework. Because what many people will find is, if they catch speakers in a more of a private setting and ask them, hey, how did this really go? The story is going to be quite different. So it's being able to understand that there are no silver bullets, and the vast majority of the companies that are successful, they were successful because they were trying different things. They were doubling down on what works, cutting losses, and not doing the stuff that doesn't. And none of them were hopeful. Like all of them were looking for some evidence that a certain approach works. And sometimes you have to be persistent enough before you can see the results. But that's why there is no science, and that's why the go-to-market strategy is such a fascinating area. And that's why people like that's why I know I will have a job in this industry or in any other with ChatGPT or any other advances. Like, you still need to figure out how to bring the product to market, and it's both an art and a science.
Wonderful. Well, Ross, you are obviously awesome, and thank you for joining us on Enterprise Security Weekly today. This has been a really fun chat.
Thank you so much. Thanks, team.
All right, we'll be back in a few moments with the weekly Enterprise News.